Welcome to Cooking to Feast. Today we're making a delicious pie. But first, we gotta make a crust, and then we gotta cook the pie on the stovetop and pour it in that crust. So what are we making? We're making pumpkin cream pie. This is for anyone that doesn't like the earthiness of pumpkin pie and wants some nice creamy vanilla to smooth it out. For our crust today, we're making an all butter crust, but you can use shortening too. There's pros and cons to each of it. And then for our filling, we're using canned pumpkins, eggs, sugar, but the big thing is the cook and serve vanilla pudding. Don't use instant or it won't work. So to start out, you'll see here there's two we're doing for regular size crust or for a deep dish. I'm doing a deep dish today. Start off by cutting up your butter into small little cubes. The secret to a good flaky pie crust when using butter is to keep the ingredients really cold, specifically the butter. If you don't keep it cold, the butter ends up melting and it doesn't hold its shape, and then you don't get the flaky layers of crust. Cube it up real small, put it in a dish, because what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna chill this out. I'm gonna put it in the freezer for about 30 minutes to get them nice and hard and cold. You can make a crust by hand, but today I'm gonna use my food processor that has a dough setting on it. Again, we have for regular size on the left and for deep dish on the right. So add your flour to this. I'm using deep dish measurements, and add it to your food processor. Then I've combined my sugar and my salt and added it as well. We're just using the food processor at this point just to mix it all up and even. You'll see that nothing's really happening. It just looks like a powder at this point, but that's what you want. So grab your butter out of the freezer, because now we're going to add it to our dry ingredients. Go ahead, just put them in there. No order, no shape or anything. The food processor is going to take care of all of this. So put your lid back on, and now we're going to pulse the butter into it. And what you're going to get is these nice little small uniform shapes of butter. And that's something I can't really do that well by hand. So here's the close-up of it. You see the butter looks like a powder now. And then another close-up, it is just these tiny little like rice-sized grains of butter. The final thing for our crust is to add the water. Again, we want to keep everything really cold, so make sure your water has some ice in it to keep it really, really cold. Add it a tablespoon at a time. And then you'll start to see that it starts to form together. You'll see these little pellets forming. Now it's getting even thicker. And then finally, you're left with a consistency that, I don't know, at first glance kind of looks like popcorn. And so take a look closer at it, and you'll see that it is almost there, and it is sticking quite well together at this point. That's it for your food processor today. We're just going to transfer the dough out of the food processor into a bowl so we can shape it and then finally chill it. So get every little bit out of it, especially if you're using a big pie plate, because you need every little bit. You'll take a look in here that just pushing it together is what we need to do. And so work quickly, because the heat of your hands can melt the butter, but just give it a couple works with your hands and you'll see it comes together in this homogeneous ball. And you don't want to overwork it. That's another thing, just enough to get it together. So lay out some plastic wrap, because we need to chill this now. If you use it right now, it's not going to work very well. It hasn't had time to really set up. So wrap it up nice and tight with some plastic wrap, and then we're going to chill this. I'm doing it overnight, but you can do it maybe like 3 or 4 hours if you're in a hurry. You're definitely going to want to just shape it a little bit. It's going to make it much easier to roll out, because once the dough is cold, it's harder, and it's going to take some muscle to roll it out. So put some flour down on a board. I'm using a cutting board, but if you have nice countertops, like marble countertops, feel free to use that. It's probably better, actually. Unwrap your dough from the refrigerator, and then we're going to want to make sure our surface is very much floured. And this includes our rolling pin. Don't be shy with the flour. It's not going to ruin anything, but the big thing is we just don't want it to stick. This is very delicate. I'm using a marble rolling pin, and if you don't have one, use anything you have. A wooden rolling pin works great. I guess you could even use a glass bottle if you're in a pinch, but the marble works great because it keeps it cold. And so you're just going to start out, put it one direction, and then roll it. And then you're going to want to turn it, but take a closer look. See, this is why we're turning, so you don't get these high spots on there. Once you turn it after each roll, this will help even it out and create a smooth and consistent layer. Feel free to pinch up the ends, because you want to make sure that you have a round shape for your pie plate. And just, again, make sure you turn it after each roll. Eventually, it's going to get too big to actually turn, but for now, this will help you get a uniform shape and a circle into it. The thickness of the dough is going to be about 1/8 of an inch. Any thicker than that, and it'll be probably too thick and too chewy, so 1/8 is right around that golden spot. You don't have to actually measure it out with the tape measure. Make sure the biggest thing is that it's consistent across the whole rolled out dough surface. Especially resist the temptation to stretch out the edges a little bit more than the center. We're going for consistency across it. Now, when you have it done, you're going to want to roll it up onto your rolling pin. This is going to make transfer extremely easy. You won't stretch the dough out, and you won't, because it's delicate and it'll rip. Then all you have to do is unroll it onto your pie plate. Right now, it kind of looks loose and messy, but that's okay because we're just going to tighten it up. Dough is still incredibly malleable at this point, and so any inconsistencies can be evened out, just like I'm doing here. And so you go around it with your hand and just make sure that it is completely shaped to the pie plate itself. This pie plate is huge, so I'm making sure that I got enough on the edges here. Fold over all the excess into your crust, and the reality is you actually want a thicker area on the crust, and that's why I didn't want you to roll it out really thin at the edges, because one of the biggest problems with an all butter crust is that it can melt. It'll shrink a little bit, definitely, but it isn't as strong as using like a shortening, so it can run the risk of actually melting and collapsing into the pie plate, especially if it's not filled like we're going to do when we bake this. One other thing that we're going to do is to make it a consistent result is we're going to weight down the pie crust so no bubbles form and, just ruin the shape of the pie crust. For this, you can use, if you want to actually buy a product for this, they have pie weights, but I'm just using some beans. It doesn't matter which kind. Just put some parchment paper down. And then we're going to bake this at 400 degrees for about 15 to 20 minutes. It all depends on how thick your crust is. Once you see that the pie is starting to brown on the edges a little bit, that's when you're going to pull it out. I want to make sure that it doesn't overcook. I don't like the really, really dark brown, real crispy pie edges, so I'm going to add some foil to it. This will slow down the browning process. Once you have that done, you're going to cook it for an additional 5 to 10 minutes, depending on thickness, of course. In the final 2 minutes of it, pull it out and scramble an egg up, because you're going to want to do an egg wash along the edge. This is going to give you that great color that you're used to when you buy a pie at the store. And then here you go. We have our finished pie crust. Looks pretty good. It's not perfect. I'm not the best pie crust maker, but this thing is going to taste great. All that butter in there, you're going to have extremely crispy edges on this. Layers of flakiness, and it's not pretty, but it's going to be delicious. And don't worry, we're going to cover all that up with pie anyways, the pumpkin pie that is. So for this is a stovetop cooked pie, and you'll see all the ingredients here are in single or double. I'm actually doing a triple for this, but that's because my pie plate is extremely large. Scramble up your eggs into the pan itself. This is a one pot thing, and then add your sugar into it. From there, we're going to add in our Jell-O cook and serve pudding. Again, don't use the instant, use the cook and serve kind. And so get it all in there, and then add our pumpkin spice. Yep, we're getting real basic on this one. We're doing a teaspoon for each serving. And then evaporated milk. Don't use condensed milk. Make sure you use evaporated milk and pour it right into there as well. This is a really simple stovetop recipe. And then to increase that vanilla flavoring, we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract for each serving. Finally, the cup of pumpkin. Don't use the pre-mixed kind. You want pure pumpkin, not the kind that's like a filling that's already made, because then there's no point in doing this. Mix it all together. I'd recommend a whisk, and then make sure it's smooth and homogeneous. There might be a couple little spots where maybe the pumpkin spice doesn't mix thoroughly in there, and you can work at it, but it's not going to be the end of the world. Now we're going to cook this on slightly higher than a medium temperature, And you're going to want to stir this the whole time because as you see, it starts to thicken up. And with all that sugar in there, if you're not stirring this, it will burn. So probably between, I mean, it's going to range, but between like, I don't know, 7 minutes to 10 minutes or so, you're going to start getting this really thick pudding-like consistency on there. It's never going to completely thicken up at this point, but this is the consistency you want. Turn off your stove at this point and let it sit for a couple minutes because it's extremely hot and I don't want you to burn yourself. Look at that. That's pretty good looking. Take your filling, and then you're going to want to just pour it directly into your pie plate. And watch out, it's hot. So don't burn yourself. I've done this a few hundred times, so I'm kind of an expert at it at this point. And here we go. This takes a lot of filling into your pie, so if you have a deeper dish pie plate, definitely double the recipe. And this recipe is scalable, so you can make it as big as you want. Smooth it out, and then here's the worst part of the recipe. You're gonna have to wait. This is a pie that needs to be eaten cold, unlike other pumpkin pies. Even though it has a really good consistency at this point, it sets up really nice the next day. And I recommend using Cool Whip. Yes, Cool Whip. I've used whipped cream, I've used ice cream, I've used everything else, and I'll be honest, this is the best. It has the best balance, it's light and fluffy, but you do you. I'm just recommending it because I know how to feast. And there you have pumpkin cream pie for anyone who doesn't like pumpkin pie. And if you like pumpkin pie, give it a try. And this is Cooking to Feast. I hope you enjoyed and subscribe for more.